Welcome, I'm the Deadwood Jedi. This is going to be another Raid Shadow Legends video. We're looking at Faction Wars again. Specifically, we're going to be looking at Banner Lords today. Banner Lords can actually be surprisingly difficult. It has a lot of helpful champions that can make this most of the content pretty doable, but it isn't like it's not filled with a lot of champions that are going to make your job really easy, and that can always be a bit of a struggle. There's not a lot of healing in it, not a lot of revive, but there are some other things going on in here that does make this a pretty doable difficulty, and the boss at stage 21 isn't particularly difficult either. So really, if you can pick the right 5 champions, you should be in pretty good shape to get this done. So what I want to do, obviously, is we're going to look at the different bosses, see what they bring to the table. Then we're going to go ahead and look at the faction itself, the champions that are available for you, so you can kind of figure out which ones you're going to want to really target and look at to bring in. And then we'll do a run on stage 21 and see if we can't beat this boss without any legendaries or crazy gear. So let's start here on stage 14. I've been looking at some of the stage 7 bosses, but frankly, they're pretty low level. You should be able to get through it just by having enough ranked champions. There's not really a lot of strategy that needs to go into it. So we're going to kind of skip looking at that one. But stage 14, we have the Dueler. And this is obviously where you might need to strategize a bit to get past this boss. Now, this is one of the tough ones. He does that AoE stun with a True Fear on one champion, and then will hit with a max HP hit immediately after because he gets an extra turn. This is definitely difficult, especially when he fills his own turn meter every time he takes damage. So it's definitely one of the harder bosses to get through here. So I just spilled my coffee. Don't mind me. But let's go ahead and kind of figure out, what are the things that we're going to want to do to deal with this? Well, the stun can't be resisted. So bringing in cleanse, bringing in block debuffs, really not going to have much of an issue for us. One of the things that is going to be an issue is that max HP hit. That means it's going to hit hard pretty much no matter what you do. You build your champions with more HP, it's going to hit just as hard. You build them with a lot of defense, well, that skill ignores defense. So how do we deal with it? There's 2 primary ways to deal with it. One is going to be ally protection. You're having the damage that those champions are taking. That's a great way to survive those hits. The other way is with revive. If you can bring a reviver, then it doesn't matter if one champion goes down, we're going to be able to revive them back up at throughout the course of the fight and stay alive and be able to complete this. So either of those approaches are going to be your best bet. There are other things though. Strengthen buff is really, really good because that just reduces the incoming damage straight out. So you don't have to worry about defense, you don't have to worry about HP. It's just going to reduce the amount of damage that you take. So that's definitely one good option. Another thing that we're going to want to make sure we have is plenty of healing, because even if we survive those hits, we're going to need to heal back up pretty quickly so we don't take another strike. So that's definitely going to be the other thing that we're really going to want to look at as we're taking down this boss. Decreased speed might be another good one. Since he's filling his turn meter, us bringing in our own turn meter boosters, whether that's a speed champion or even in reverse by decreasing the enemy speed, that can be really helpful too. I really appreciate you coming by to watch this video, and if you enjoy it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below, the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. And of course, if you enjoyed today's music, we have that Soundstripe link down below in the pinned comment description of this video, along with my code Deadwood Jedi to save yourself 15%. And of course, if you're looking for account work, you can find that on my website, deadwoodjedi.com. And then on stage 21, we have the Protector. Now, this was probably one of the easiest bosses to deal with. It's kind of a pain in the butt, right? He has an ally attack ability, he has a revive skill, so those can be a bit difficult, but he's not placing a lot of debuffs on us, right? He just has a fear, and it's only a 40% chance, it's the small version of fear on his A1 skill, so it's not really something to be super scared of. The issue is he will revive the adds on the side. Now, when you're running auto, almost always your allies try to hit the adds on the side. It's a little bit of annoying because he just revives them back up. When you're just running this though, I highly recommend just targeting the boss, ignore the adds on the side, and it's going to make this run very easy and simple. The key though, you still have to survive the hits from the minions on the side, right? You still have to survive those attacks, survive that ally attack that he brings into the table. So if you can bring in enough healing, enough survivability, it really isn't much of an issue at all. So we should be able to do this pretty simple. And actually, my team here is going to be pretty basic, right? I'm bringing in Stagnite to give me decreased defense, decreased attack, and decreased speed. I've got Azure here, who actually is very underrated as an ally protection champion. I think he's actually really good for this role. And then, of course, we've got Ursula the Mourner. She's phenomenal. If you can get her, it's actually going to make this a lot easier. One, she's a reviver. Two, she brings in nice buffs like Strengthen and I think increased defense. It also has AoE decreased attack as well, which is really nice. So definitely somebody I would recommend. And then I've got a couple rares. I've got Dagger in there. I've got Valerie in there. There's some interesting champions we can bring into those roles. Neither one is necessary for this, but I think they'll help us throughout this fight. I don't even think this is an optimized team. These are probably not the 5 champions I would most like to have for this, but they're 5 champions that are certainly going to make the job doable. Okay, this faction obviously has a fair amount of legendaries. There's a lot of champions in the Bannerlord faction overall. So you have a nice little diversity, at least when it comes to champion possibilities here. Obviously, the legendaries are going to be very good to bring in. If you have them, I would bring them in. As always, it makes the job a lot easier. But their epics are a little bit hit and miss. Now, one of the issues with this faction is, despite having all this armor on, a lot of them have very weak defense. You know, we're talking about champions like Rowan, right? Or champions like, not Seneschal, but Knight Errant. Champions that can hit hard offensively, but have low defense or low base HP and don't really lend themselves to weaker gear. So there's a lot of champions in here I would definitely ignore, right? Like Horden just isn't really going to do the job for you. But they have some strong ones as well. Now, if you are successful enough through Doom Tower to get Archmage Helmet, 100% I recommend bringing him in. Not only does he bring great buffs, he brings a lot of speed and an AoE stun, so you're getting a lot of stuff out of his kit. Definitely somebody I would recommend. Stagnite is fantastic with his AoE decreased defense and decreased attack and decreased speed on the A1. I think he's kind of essential to doing this team. Now, not essential in like you have to have him and only him, but he is one of those champions that's going to make everything a lot easier. As we know, decreased defense lets us do damage so much better, and it's definitely something we want to look out for if we can. But there are lots of other champions here too. Like, I'm bringing in Ursula. Like I said, she is the only reviver here. That is a problem, obviously, as an epic, the only epic reviver, but she's fantastic for it. Now, if you don't have Ursula, you're going to want to stay alive as much as you can. So you're going to want to build on the tankier side. Azure is going to help with that a lot just because he has a massive AoE ally protection ability. Warcaster obviously has a block buff or block damage skill. Those are really good things to be able to bring in because that's going to just help you survive overall, right? So those are things I would be looking at. Giscard is actually somebody I would definitely be looking at with an AoE provoke. That makes things a lot easier for you. I'm not using him in this, but that's definitely one of those champions I would look hard at as a possibility. But you're noticing there's not a lot of health in here, not a lot of healing at all, in fact. One of the few champions that does some healing is actually Lordly Legionary with a continuous heal on all allies. This is not the kind of champion I would expect that from. And he doesn't have great defense or speed or defense, right? But he does have a decreased speed, and that's actually pretty helpful. So that might be an option for you to bring in. Another champion, Gerhardt, might be a decent one for you with some fear abilities in his skills. He doesn't have any healing, though. So, again, not really somebody I would really recommend, unfortunately. I mean, when it really comes down to it, you really need Ursula. And if you don't, you're going to need to find some healing somewhere in here, hopefully with one of your legendaries. And many of the legendaries do have a lot of healing, right? Whether it's Thalia or Raglan or Manaya, is more than a fair amount of healing in that. Even Black Knight does, too. But there are also, I did mention this, there are some solid rares in this faction. I think Valerie is vastly underrated. Actually has a pretty sizable shield if you can build her HP up enough. Has a, what do you call it, a buff extension ability. So if you can combine Valerie with an ally protection champion like Azure, it can be really helpful. And if you need another ally protection champion, Myrmidian, I think, is phenomenal for this. Ally protection and continuous heal on himself. So he's going to heal himself over time. He has an AoE decrease attack. It's a small one, but it still helps. And even a provoke on his A1. So there are some nice things to like in his kit as well for a rare champion. I think that's actually good. And another option here too is Steadfast Marshal. Now, there are some interesting combinations you can do with Steadfast Marshal because he has a veil on all allies except for this champion for 2 turns. That's pretty cool. So it makes everybody focus damage on him. He also has an increased defense buff with an extra turn ability. So even though this is on a 3-turn cooldown and this can be on a 3-turn cooldown, it kind of brings them both down to like a 2-turn cooldown, which is really, really nice. So that's actually a champion I would look at. Now, would I look at him to do things solo? No. You're going to want to pair him with some specific people, I think, to make him work. I'll get into that in a second here. A couple of the rares, though, I think are worth looking at. Spymaster has a lot of interesting stuff, a counterattack and provoke, and really high base stats, actually. Makes her very, very viable. So that's somebody I would look at. This is on a 5-turn cooldown. It's not perfect, but it is something that you could look at. Block buffs as an AoE is definitely a nice skill, as is a steal or a duration decrease of buffs on enemies. So that's a possibility. And then the very last one I want to point out is Dagger. I think Dagger's severely underrated. She's really low base HP in defense. So, probably not somebody you're going to want to use. But if you're stuck with rares, AoE decreased defense. That's what I like about her. It's not 100%, 75, but that's pretty significant. Also can land a big decrease attack as well, which is nice. So there is a lot to like about her as a champion. So there's definitely some possibilities as far as approaches to this goes. But it's going to be one of the harder ones as far as it's one of the easiest bosses, but it's hard as in the champions that are available to you don't lend itself to a lot of variety and flexibility. Now, one thing I will say, you got any AoE damage dealers in here, you do probably want to put some of them in a stun set. That would help, especially if you're pairing them with Azure, who combos off stun. That definitely wouldn't hurt as far as getting through the waves. And I think the waves are probably going to be tougher than the actual boss itself. But, we can do things like bringing in regen, shield sets, immortal gear, lifesteal even, to get the healing that we need to be able to survive if you don't have it naturally. If you don't have an Ursula and you do have to survive, those are definitely some possible ways to do it. Working on with shields from somebody like Valerie, I think, can be really helpful as well. And then, of course, lean on your legendaries where you can. Okay, so this is the team I'm using. We've got Azure in here. He does have a nice aura. I really like him, actually. I think he's vastly underrated for a lot of this content. It can really help you stay alive. We've got Valerie in there. We've got Dagger. We've got Stag Knight. We've got Ursula. Now, I was just looking at how I had them geared out. None of them are fully geared out. I'm actually missing pieces on many of them. The two champions that are geared out are going to be Stag Knight and Ursula, and that's the two that are the most important. Stag Knight, obviously, to make sure we keep those debuffs up, plus he can deal pretty good damage. And then Ursula, because I'm going to be relying on her to keep everybody alive, and that's going to be crucial. Now, I'm going to tell you this. I did beat it with this team, exactly, but I don't want to have to do like an 8-minute run, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I'm going to take Dagger out of this team, and we're going to go ahead and bring in more of a damage dealing champion, somebody that's a little bit maybe less reliable, I guess you'd say, and see if we can't just make this run a little bit faster, right? So I'm actually going to bring in, do I want to bring in Sinestral? I think we're just going to bring in Rowan. Again, not somebody I would necessarily recommend, but I think she's going to be a good addition as far as getting through it faster. Now, obviously, survivability is key, but we have a reviver, so I don't have to worry about it as much. Even with her low base defense, her abysmally low base defense, her low base HP, I think she should still do a good job for us. Now, like I said, I do have both Ursula as well as Stag Knight built very, very well. And that's going to be important because I need them to do their job and do it well. You can see we got the deep buffs out there. AoE, Ursula is going to be able to make sure that we do revive if we go down. So they're about 230 speed or so. Everybody else is, I don't even really know, to be honest with you. I know they don't have full gear on. Rowan, I did end up putting full gear on. I gave her some good crit damage, so she's actually going to hit pretty hard. But I brought her in specifically kind of to speed this run up. I was able to do this with Dagger, who did not have full gear on, by the way. So you can see we don't need a full stacked roster in order to do this, or full stacked gear in order to get through this content. But you can see we got nice ally protection, the strengthen buff, the increased defense buff are all things that help keep us alive through these fights, even as the enemy's taking damage on us. Now, these waves, obviously, this is the Broadmaw wave where she does revive people if they go down. It's not really much of an issue. I would target her if you have a choice, if you're going to manual this. Otherwise, it should be just fine getting through it eventually. The next wave is going to be Maneater, Steel Skull, and Norog, which is always a little bit of a pain, but again, should be manageable for us. Now, there are several champions in this faction that can do buff removal. that would definitely be helpful for this next wave, but I don't think it's essential. You can get through it otherwise, but it will speed things up if you're trying to get through the wave itself. So that might be something, if you're getting stuck there, that you want to look at bringing in. Now, once we get here, you can see, again, we keep those buffs up. We get the debuffs out. This is perfect for us, right? And Rowan is a really good damage dealer champion, actually. I really like her a lot. She brings poison. She brings a stun on a triple hit skill. It's really nice. So she definitely has a lot of things that come to the table that can be helpful for us. So definitely somebody I wouldn't sleep on, but generally because of her low base defense, she's not really suitable for this. But we have 3 factors in our favor: strengthen buff, increased defense buff, and then the ally protection from Azure. Those are all massive buffs for us, right? They all help keep us alive even when we have low base stats. So being able to have those champions in here, especially with the extension from Valerie, makes a world of difference. So there's definitely some, ways to get around the fact that many of these champions have some low base stats. Now, obviously, if you don't have Ursala, it's going to be a lot harder to get through this content, right? That definitely makes things more difficult. As you can see here, we're starting to take some damage through these waves here. But one of the things you can always do is just build, lifesteal on your champions, build regen on your champions. I have regen on Ursala, that's why she's able to stay alive with no problem. So those are always possible ways to get through this content as well. Not to mention, whatever legendaries you have is going to make a huge difference as far as being successful in this part of the game. So there are multiple possibilities as far as how you'd want to do that. But yeah, Rowan she's great. I really do like her. Obviously for clan boss primarily, but she's going to be really good here as well, which is fantastic. All right, got that down. Now we just got to get through Norog and we'll get to the boss. Okay, now we're at the boss here. So remember, this boss has a lot of revive. So this could take forever. You notice all of my champions are targeting the guys on the side. I don't care about them. So what am I gonna do? I'm actually gonna click on the boss here, just target the boss. And this is how I would go about doing this. Now you did see we lose Azure, but this is why we have Ursala in there. So we don't have to worry about that. Obviously, if you have 2 ally protection champions, that'll help. Or maybe, because of the boss strength, you don't even want to deal with that. Just don't have any ally protection up once you get to the boss himself. But you can see, once we target the boss, all we're going to do is focus them down. Now it is hard, right? They have 2 ads on the side, one that plays AoE decreased defense, and another one that it's a Rowan in a Zargala is who's there. So we have cleansing that would be helpful, but there's not a lot of options here for that, unfortunately. Now somebody like an Archmage Helmet would be phenomenal for this. He's really good with that AoE stun and all the speed buffs. That just helps a lot as far as trying to clear the content, take our turns, cycle through, heal up in between. Really a good approach. There are also several champions in this faction that have leech debuffs, and that can be a great way to heal up as well, especially when you do some AoE hits. Now, is it as strong as like lifesteal? It can be for sure, right? It's still 30%, but it's a little, obviously it's more targeted and the buffs have to stay on. So it can be a little bit more problematic, but you can see here, poisons from Rowan. We're keeping the debuffs up. The revive from Ursala is enough to make us survive this fight, and we're going to be successful. So, yay. There it is. There it is. So, not the fastest run, right? But we're able to get through it with pretty good success. You can see Rowan's poison's doing a lot of damage, but Stagnite is also a really strong damage dealer, and Ursala is not bad herself. Now, this is obviously with a rare in Valerie, a champion I probably wouldn't even recommend in Rowan. There's multiple ways to get through this for sure, but without Ursala, without some of those legendary healers, it is going to be tougher, and you're probably going to have to make up the difference of the healing with your sets. So just kind of keep that in mind as you approach this. A lot of times things like stun sets will help you a lot through this, and actually once you get to the boss, because we're not killing the ads, the minions on the side, that'll actually help us deal with them as well and lower the damage that we take. But you are going to need to find ways to heal up, and that's going to be really difficult. So I might look at really hard at bringing somebody like Lordly Legionary in there that at least provides some healing over the course of a fight. Valerie has a bit of a shield, not a great one, so that might be something worth considering. But I would really look at bringing in a lot of healing sets on these champions. I think that would probably do the best job for you. But it's not simple, right? Ursala is kind of the linchpin to make this one work. Without her, it is going to be a bit of a struggle, but again, I think you should be able to overpower it with just a lot of attacks, a lot of damage. It shouldn't be too difficult to get through all of this. So that's the video, guys. That's what we got. Oh, let me go ahead and show you the champions. So start off really quick. I did say I beat this with Dagger. You can see I don't even have her fully kitted out, and I was able to beat it with her in there instead of Rowan. So just so you have an idea of what it takes to actually get through this. But we can look at Rowan here. I did finally, finish building her out. She does have solid crit damage, really good crit damage, crit rate. So she's able to do pretty good damage as it goes. You can see only 1500 defense though. That is definitely her weak spot. And so she takes some damage quite a bit. Mastery wise, these are offense and support tree, very much a clan boss build there. You can also see my Valerie, which you might notice doesn't have a bit of gear on. Definitely an issue, right? But what we did do is build her the right way to survive, right? 3,000 defense, 30,000 HP. This is enough for her to survive the fight, and that's kind of what we're looking at. Obviously, if I can build her faster, I can build her tankier, it's only going to be better for us, but clearly wasn't necessary. Mastery-wise, offense and defensive tree, much like with Clan Boss. And then we have Azur. Now, Azur is, I just really like this champion. Has some really nice stuff in his kit. Primarily, obviously, that ally protection ability, but I'm missing a chest piece. Didn't have it on. Didn't feel like it was needed since we were able to beat it anyway, because we're getting to the stats, and that's really all you care about is the stats, not the gear, it's the stats. So we got 57,000 HP, plenty for an ally protection champion, 2,400 defense. Now, obviously, if I bumped that defense those few times he died against the boss, maybe that wouldn't happen. If I bumped his HP, same kind of scenario. So there's definitely some ways we can make this better. Also, speed's incredibly low at 154. If we can bump that up, that'll give him more opportunities to cycle through his skills, heal up more often, and more importantly, place that ally protection up 100% of the time instead of as infrequently as he did. As far as masteries go, he's on offensive tree and defensive tree, much more of a support type of build here. We're not really looking to do a lot of damage with him. And then we have Stagnite. This champion I absolutely love. Just has all the debuffs that you want, whether it's decreased defense, decreased attack, or decreased speed. Got a really great kit and hits decently hard too. You'll notice I have him in shield set. This is just from past content that I've done. Not really necessary for this, but it helps us survive in the early parts of the fight if we don't get the ally protection up soon enough. Good HP, defense is pretty low, this is why he was dying, but really good speed, 228 speed. That's going to help him cycle through his skills over and over, but more importantly, keep those debuffs up. That's why we have him in there, and good actually to land all those skills. Also, pretty solid crit rate and crit damage. This is why he can do so much damage. As far as masteries go, you can see we went down the offensive tree and the support tree here. And just so you know, I know he has some blessings on. I have not put any blessings on him yet. So he's still blessing free. I haven't figured out which one I want to put on him yet, but that's Stagnite. And then very last is going to be Ursula the Mourner, who's amazing champion. Absolutely amazing. I have her in a regen and speed set, and I think this is a pretty good combination for her as we want her to survive. So 56k HP, 3k defense. Both of those numbers are kind of what we're looking for there. And then that speed, 230, we want to cycle through those skills, right? If we're reviving, we want to make sure we get that skill up over and over and over, reduce those cooldowns. Not to mention it's the same skill that has an increased defense and strengthen debuff, or buff, I should say, which is so valuable to staying alive. So definitely that's how I would go. Mastery-wise, you can see we go down the support tree, maximize our turn meter and our debuffs, and then the offensive tree down to War Master. Now, you could very easily go down to defensive tree combined with the support tree. I think that's actually a really recommended way to go for most content out there, but I have her strong enough where I can go ahead and, get a little damage out of her too. So that's the Banner Lords. Hopefully you guys found this helpful. I always think it's kind of a fun little mechanic thing going through these faction wars, seeing what we need, what's available in the faction. This one's definitely more limited, especially when you discount the legendaries that are in it. It's definitely more limited as far as trying to get through, and can be a real struggle for a lot of you, especially if you don't have Ursula the Mourner. But if you have her, it's, I think, pretty simple, actually. I think this is actually one of the easier stages to get through. There are other champions that can do what Stagnite does, so you don't necessarily need him. He just makes it a lot easier. But the big thing is there's not a lot of healing, not a lot of protection in this, right? Azur, Ursula, and really Lordly Legionary, like who'd think that's the healer in this faction, but he kind of is. So that's definitely something that's missing from this faction, and something you're going to have to pay attention to as you're building your champions and making sure you can survive. So definitely something I would keep an eye out as far as approaches to this goes. Now, so that's what we got for today, guys. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe so you can see the next video I put out. Until next we meet, I'm the Deadwood Jedi.